What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Sorry that we missed you guys last week. Production schedule got a little bit messed up with my work trip to Europe. We thought we could make it work, but the 6 hour time difference proved to be too much for us. So I think that's only the third week we've missed in 136 or 137 episodes. So still pretty good, but I do hate it when we don't get a chance to record during the week. So glad to be back. Threw off our schedule a little bit. We were hoping to kick off August with the NFL and make the August football month. But we have one more NBA podcast to do, and that is today's episode, the top 10 players in the NBA. I'm going to be joined by Clint, Devin, and Matt here shortly to break down the last 10 guys on our top 30 list. If you missed the first two podcasts for the NBA top 30, you can find those on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast as well, where we went through players 11 through 30. We're going to start today off with a banger, a guy that we talk about a lot on this podcast, and someone that I know pushes a lot of buttons for Matt. So that one should be fun. And then starting next week, you're going to have 2 episodes of Fouled Out per week coming out on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And it's going to be our NFL divisional previews for all 8 divisions in the NFL, leading up to the week of September 4th, the first week of the NFL season, where we will do the famous Picks Pod. One podcast that was promised that we're still working on is the top 10 quarterbacks at the end of the season. We're going to get that out, a predictive podcast of who we think the top 10 quarterbacks will be after this NFL season. That'll come out in August as well. So keep an eye out for that one. Just a reminder as well, we set up a email address, fouledoutsports@gmail.com, for you guys to reach out to us. We really want to hear from you. Give us some feedback on what's going well with the show, what you don't like, what you want to hear, or just chat with me and Matt. We're always looking forward to connecting with you guys. So hit us up, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. But for now, the guys are joining me to break down the top 10, the best 10 players in the NBA. Let's go. All right, we are back. We got Matt, we got Devin, we got Clint. We brought everybody back to do the top 10. Devin tried to get out of it. He missed players 11 through 20 last week, but we were not letting that happen for the end of this list because we got a couple bones to pick with Devin this week.
When we do war together.
I know. I thought I was just going to be able to sneak away, and here you guys, you dragged me back into it. But I'll play along. I'll try to deal with this. No, I'm just kidding. I'm happy to be back on. It was unfortunate that I couldn't make it last week or a couple weeks ago.
Devin, everybody can be a rid of sneaky every now and again.
I feel like this episode is going to be more of a fight because just like at least knowing Matt and knowing that I'm about to push all of his buttons here, like in the first 2 or 3 picks, interested to see where this one goes, but let's dive right into it. Down to player number 10, Celtics forward Jason Tatum. Again, I feel bad because during the playoffs, we promised the fans that there would be no more Celtics segments on this podcast. And we went way too long on Jaylen Brown, and now we're going to go way too long on Jason Tatum. I had him 7, Devin at 8, Matt at 12, and Clint at 18.
Damn.
Fuck Tatum. That's what I have to say about him. I'm sick of people talking about this guy when he hasn't won dick.
I mean, to be fair, Matt and I had a whole conversation where we were like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Tatum, and it was like, I really would rather take Shai over him as like a player, like for what I feel like he does for the team. But he hasn't, plays for the Thunder, their team. I mean, even though he did kind of lead them to 45 wins or whatever they won, it's like there's nothing to go off, playoff wise for it. So I gave Tatum the edge there. But there's a lot of players I would rather have over him in terms of just like play style, what he does for his team. I feel like his on-off switch is very strange. Like, he'll drop a 50 piece in the playoffs, and then the next game it's like, oh, where's Jason Tatum? Oh, 12 points. Oh, okay. That's good job.
Yeah. Well, and that on-off switch is the piece. In years past, we've talked about how like you wanted to see him add more to his game. If he's not scoring, like, can you help your team in other ways? He has certainly added other ways to help his team, and that's great. But that on-off switch, I feel like has been exacerbated over the last year. And it's not even just like, I'm going to drop 50 this game and I'm not showing up the next game. It's, I'm going to drop 30 in the first half, and then I put up 3 shots in the fourth quarter when my team needs me to score.
I got a question for you, for both of you guys. Have you ever seen like the original Scary Movie?
Yeah.
Okay,
Not for
so
a
there's
long
a
time.
there's a scene in the very beginning of the movie where there's like a table, right? And it has a pistol, a knife, and a banana. And she takes the banana for whatever reason. And I feel like Jason Tatum has all of the tools that he needs to win at his disposal, yet he fucking like picks the whatever thing that isn't going to get him to the promised land. And it's like, that is the fucking maddening thing about him to me. Like, you literally have like way more assets than anybody else. Well, not anybody else, but you could argue in the league, right? Like, you have a very good position. And how have you not gotten past like some of the other teams that have come up in your way? It just blows me away. Like,
yeah.
And that's why I think the arguments for like Shea and some of these other guys are better, because like they're doing more with less.
So I'm going to make the argument for Tatum. I have him the highest. I just don't think there are very many players who can do what he does, especially in the playoffs. And certainly
squander potential. Is that what you're referencing here?
No, I mean, I think that Jason Tatum does all of the things that we've complained about the other guys on this list not doing. Like, he plays games. He shows up in the playoffs for the most part. He has huge games when his team needs him. Like, I think about that Game 6 Philly game in the playoffs this year, where he was just absolute ass for the entire game. Like, I think he was like 3 of 19 going into the end of the game. And instead of not shooting, or instead of turning the switch off, he flicks the switch on, leads the team to a win, comes back in Game 7 and then drops 51, the most points ever in a Game 7. Like, I agree. The inconsistency is maddening, but the ceiling, his playoff ceiling, is higher than almost anybody, like pretty much anybody we've listed so far, and almost anybody that we're going to list. Like 51 points in Game 7 against Philly. Go back to Milwaukee last year, down 3-2 in Game 6. He drops 46. Like, it's there. All this stuff is there. It just needs to be more consistent. But he's still young.
What you're saying there, I don't disagree with that. It's all there. That's why he's 12, not 7.
I mean, I have him higher than that, because like, we're going to talk about other people who I have lower on my list that you guys have higher. I'm like, okay, there's multiple people in front of Jason Tatum on this list who didn't make the playoffs the last couple of years and have never made a conference finals. Jason Tatum's been in the league like 6 years. He has 3 conference finals. He's made it to an NBA finals. And we're about to talk about like 10 dudes who haven't accomplished jack shit that we're going to put ahead of him on this list.
Right. And he had a really loaded roster this year and went down 0-3 against the Heat. And they took the foot off the gas, and that's the only reason why it went 7.
Yeah, but if we're going to eliminate everybody who has a bad series against the Heat from this list, then like we should just list Jokic and just be like, it's one podcast, not 3. We don't have to spend 3 weeks doing this shit to talk about who can beat the Heat.
I don't care if you have a bad series. I care when it's the fourth quarter, it's a ball game, and you won't shoot the ball.
I guess in support of Tatum, I will say that the Celtics, I think, had a really tumultuous season last year in terms of everything that happened with Ime Udoka and that whole thing. He really seemed like the perfect coach for them. And, you know, I mean, maybe we're underestimating that element of it a little bit, but I will ask
maybe
this
that's
question.
a red flag.
Yeah. I mean, potentially, I mean, he's, you know, but Tatum is the best player on the team. You know, you would like to think that maybe he could find a way to get it done. But let me ask you guys this question. Is Jason Tatum like the most efficient volume shooter of all time? Because I feel like he is like one of those, maybe not the most efficient, But he reminds me of a lot of those guys from like 20 years ago that would just like put up a bunch of stats, but on bad efficiency. But he's like, he plays in the modern era. I mean, he shoots like 8 threes a game or 9 threes a game, and he's making like 35% of them, which isn't like bad. But I just, he's very much, I feel like if you took a player out of like the sort of isolation scoring era of basketball and like put him in the modern era with all of the analytics and advantages we have in that regard, and he's like that kind of a player.
Well, my question for you there is, are we going to consider prime Kevin Durant a volume scorer?
I mean,
because he's the most efficient I've ever seen.
I think this goes back to my problem with the Celtics as a team and how they're coached and how they play the game of basketball. And we talked about this with Jaylen Brown. It's like a my turn, your turn. We're going to shoot 43s a game, even if it's not going in. We're just going to keep popping them. We're going to ISO every single possession and try to score in like the most inefficient ways possible. It's like, God, if Tatum was just on a team where there was like a real point guard who was like setting him up in positions to score, how much better could he be rather than like, hey, Jason, your job is to go out there and shoot 9 threes, even if you're not making them every single game.
That's just Duke basketball. Like if you're talking about like what kind of measure of success, yes, Jason Tatum has had an enormous amount of success in his career. I'm not going to take away the fact that this guy's a great ball player. Like looking at the consensus list, I don't have any issues with him being where he's at. I have him rated lower because to me, he underperforms when he needs to like kick somebody's fucking teeth out of their mouth and tell them to get the hell out of the way. But he doesn't do that. Like he doesn't have that like killer instinct drive where it's like, no, I'm going to fucking win and I'm going to take these assholes, whether they're coming with me or they're kicking and screaming behind me. And that's why, like, I don't have them as high as you guys do, because to me, it's just like you've underperformed in the spots where like stars are supposed to shine. You haven't done it consistently yet.
Like the peaks are still there, though. Like I mentioned, like if you go through, he's played 94 playoff games in 6 seasons. And you go through them, and it's like there are tons of 30s and 40s. My bigger problem with it is like what Matt mentioned earlier is that like some of those 30-point games don't tell the full story of, he scored 30, but he scored it in the first 3 quarters. And then the fourth quarter was meh. So like, I agree. It's the inconsistency for me, but his peak is higher than other dudes we're going to talk about. But I think one of the key things Clint mentioned is winning. And I wanted to pull in guy number 9 into this conversation too, because I think it's very relevant. Number 9 on the list is maybe Blazers, maybe Miami point guard. Who knows? Like this podcast is going to come out tomorrow and he might not be on the Blazers anymore, but it's Damian Lillard. Matt had him 6, Clint 8. I had him 12 and Devin had him 14. This was my question I wrote down is like, why is Dame higher than Tatum? I look at Dame's career. He's accomplished nothing. Honestly, and I
mean, he's been to a Western Conference Finals with Enes Kanter as the starting center.
But how many Western Conference Finals games has he won?
I mean, he's been to as many as Jason Tatum.
Jason Tatum's been to 3.
And he's never been to a Western Conference Finals.
Okay.
My argument
it's fair.
My argument for Dame being at, and I'm pretty happy with how this part kind of turned out because it's really close to where I had him. So, but like the West is way harder. And I think my argument, if I'm going to compare the two, he's done more with less. Like, absolutely, he has.
Absolutely. And you can't argue against that.
And that's,
I wouldn't say he's done more.
Okay, he's done the same. But... Well, I would argue that getting to the Western Conference Finals is a hell of a lot harder than it is in the East. I mean, splitting hairs, like they're all professional ball players and they're all fucking 12 times better than I am or was, or whatever you want to say.
He literally had to beat Jokic to get there.
He's also dealt with some unfortunate injury history, but
Yeah.
So I had him the lowest on my list, and I'm a huge fan of Damian Lillard, but part of me does wonder because he has the playoff moments, right? Like I remember, staying up late. I watched that game where it was like his first or second, I think it was his second year in the league when he made that buzzer beater against the Rockets to like win that series in the first round or something. And he was really young at the time. I'm like, man, this guy's going to be it's going to be something special. And then he has the shot against, in Paul George's face against the Thunder. He's got the meme like
playoff P.
Right. Like, so I feel like Damian Lillard, he has the playoff moments. And in some ways, I do kind of wonder if that overshadows his team's lack of success overall. Like, I mean, because on one hand, you're like, well, he had to be there to make those moments happen. He was the only reason why his team was even in those situations to begin with. So that's all very valid. But
yeah, let me ask you guys a question, though. So I agree. Dame has had a lot of excellent playoff moments. When did those moments happen?
Well, that was kind of my point is like, the one happened in a first round series, I believe, against the Rockets, or it was a second round. No, it was a first round series, I think. And it was like, it was a big deal because the Blazers had made it, that far in the playoffs in however long it had been. And then I'll be honest with you, that Thunder series, I don't even remember when that was. That was probably the second round.
So that kind of adds to my point, but my point is more like, what years did those happen? Because it hasn't been the last couple, because the Blazers haven't made the playoffs in 2-3 years.
Counter argument. What player in the league right now has a better rap career than Damian Lillard?
I mean,
if people can't see my face, it's dead ass serious right now.
You make a solid point. Damian Lillard
solidified his
number one.
Boom. Okay, player number 8. Let's move on. No, it's just...
But like, part of what I take issue with on this list is that player 8 has definitely accomplished less than him on this list in the playoffs. And I think if we're gonna really like hold his feet to the fire, like we gotta do the same for that guy too.
Yeah, we're gonna. Oh,
don't worry, I'm gonna fucking flame him too. Like,
we're gonna do that in a minute. But my point was more like, I think that we knock a lot of other guys. Like, I think Dame Lillard gets put on a pedestal for a lot of people, myself included, because I'm a big Dame fan. I'm not trying to disparage Dame too much, but like, he is not getting knocked as much as other guys who are further down this list when he has some of the same issues, like lack of playoff success. He's played 87 games in the last 2 years, hasn't made the playoffs in 2 years. You know who Damian Lillard is? This is my favorite comp.
He's more wealthy than all of us will ever be.
Yes,
that's what he is.
Yes,
Damian Lillard is Tracy McGrady.
Ooh.
No player in the history of the NBA is more beloved and has accomplished less than Tracy McGrady.
Absolutely. He's one of my favorites.
I mean,
I don't know.
He's everybody's favorite.
I don't know if I agree.
He did nothing. He literally never made it out of the first round. Like that is awful.
That part is true, but did he ever make it to an NBA finals without practicing?
That's true. But honestly, it's a good comp, though.
That would be like accomplishing something, though.
Yeah,
I suppose. I don't know. I
do like that. I do like that comp, though.
Dame's played a much higher percentage of his games, though. So
yeah, but
like much higher.
But this is the point of the comp, though, is that like we all put Damian Lillard on a pedestal, just like we did Tracy McGrady, and like he does not get dragged for not accomplishing anything.
Well, shoe game's really good too, though.
Yeah, shoe game's great. So was
Tracy McGrady's.
Tracy McGrady just
great too.
I think Tracy McGrady just has like some of the best highlights ever. Like if you watch it, like he just was. I don't know. That guy was he was
players
Kevin
talk
Durant
about him
Kevin Durant, and he was
with great reverence. Like Kobe was like T-Mac, man. Like there's like interviews with him. So yeah, I think it's a good comparison. I also think like Tracy McGrady, I'm trying to think back. Holy cats, that's like middle school for me.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, though, is I think that anybody who's around our approximate age, we're all like early 30s. I think anybody in their like between 30 to 35. If you ask them who their top 10 favorite players of all time are in NBA history, that Tracy McGrady's on that list for every single person. But if Tracy McGrady played nowadays and was as good as he was and could not make it out of the first round, he would be getting annihilated on social media.
Slaughtered. Yeah,
So,
he would get destroyed.
but Dame gets a pass though. Yep. But speaking of not accomplishing anything, let's go to player number 8.
Yeah.
Player 8. This is why Devin had to be back on the podcast.
Yeah. I knew this was coming.
Number 8 is 76ers center Joel Embiid.
Fuck Joel Embiid. Like,
Yeah.
I am.
Well,
God, fuck this guy.
I had him highest on my list. I had him 4th, and I'll try my best to defend my argument here, or to make my argument. Really, it's pretty simple. And normally, I don't know. I feel like you guys probably know me well enough now. Normally, I do not rate players in this way, but I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt and not have too much recency bias in terms of. But I don't know. I guess maybe I probably should have. I don't know. He was the MVP. That's really what it is to me. And it's not only was he the MVP. Looking back on it in hindsight, I think it's easy to say, you know what? Jokic should have been he should have been the MVP again. And I've never liked voter fatigue or even the idea of it. I understand that it's there and I understand that it exists, but it's like the best guy should win the award. But in terms of just an offensive center, an offensive player, the way Embiid, at least in the regular season, was getting that done, it's like, to me, he's like the only traditional big man like center. Like, he plays like old school Hall of Fame centers while still having a lot of the modern, he can make jump shots, he can, score from the elbow, all that. But so I don't know, during the regular season, I think it was easy to look at it and be like, offensively, he was probably the best player in the regular season. But it is very hard to defend having him this high on the list, considering how he played in the playoffs this year, how his team seemingly always collapses in the playoffs, and he's never really had a good series. So I'll just make it easy for you guys. Get your tomatoes ready. You can start throwing them at me here in like 5 seconds. My argument's plain and simple. He finally got that MVP award, and I think he deserved it for the most part. I don't know, man. Embiid, he played really well this year in the regular season, at least. And I don't know.
I'm really serious over here. Like, he took his t-shirt off. He's got his arms bare. Like, he's ready to fucking fight.
It's really hot in my kitchen. I don't know who wants to say the thing, because Devin's absolutely right. Joel Embiid plays very good in the regular season.
Well, I could say it. But he never plays good in the playoffs. It's just.
I'll tell you guys the same damn thing I told Clint a few weeks ago. Joel Embiid's a fucking loser. Look, Joel Embiid is an incredibly talented player, and like, he's had some really, really great defensive seasons too, so I'll give him credit there. He can really play on both sides of the floor, which is great. But if you're not bringing that to the postseason and you are not a dominant force in the postseason, like, why does any of that matter?
True. And going back on my stance, I still think he's deserving of at least this year being ranked high on the list, but it's like, now that Ben Simmons is gone, you can't blame your playoff woes on him anymore. And it's like, you aren't getting it done.
Right.
Now it's like, then he just kind of seems like now he's blaming James Harden, who did also play really bad for several games. But it's just, when is it you? Like, when is it your fault?
To put some numbers behind what Matt's saying about Joel Embiid not being in the playoffs, this year he averaged 33 points per game in the regular season, 24 in the playoffs. Last year, 31 points in the regular season, 24 in the playoffs. Offensive rating, regular season this year, 124, dropped to 106 in the playoffs this year. Last year, he was at 119 in the regular season, dropped to 111. Has never made it past the second round.
His attitude is fucking terrible. And that's like, I think that has a lot to do with the level of success that he's had. Like, you're very quick to push things off onto like other people or to make excuses when it's like, maybe you should have just fucking said, hey, my production was way lower. I need to do better, and like just move on with it. I'd have much more respect as like for him as a player and as a leader if he had that tact than he does now.
I just want to say that Jason Tatum beats this guy like a rented mule in the playoffs every single year.
Well, so does anyone else who plays in the second round. So
somehow he ended up higher. Yeah, I just think that if Joel Embiid's the best player on your team, that your ceiling is your second round exit. I kind of wish I would have ranked him closer to where Matt had him. I was a little bit jealous when I was putting this together. I was like, I was too high. I had him at 9. Matt had him the lowest at 14, which is probably a good call. But let's talk about someone who does show up when it matters. And this is someone that we're all kind of separated on, but we had right around the top 10 for all of us, and that is Suns guard. Looking at my notes and realizing I cannot spell the word guard. Devin Booker.
Word.
I have Garud.
Oh my lord.
I had him number 4. Matt had him 5. I talked Matt into this one. Clint 10 and Devin 11. So the top 3 on our list was consensus. We all had the same 3 guys in the same order. I thought that was the easiest part of this list. Was like these are the top 3 guys.
Mm-hmm.
I thought number 4 was the hardest spot on this list. And obviously Devin Booker's number 7 on the consensus, but I had him 4 on mine. Because there's so many guys, so many contenders for who could be in that spot. And I went through everybody, but I kept coming back to Devin Booker. Playoffs this year, almost 34 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists. He was number 2 in PER in the playoffs, only behind Jokic. Had a true shooting of 69% in the playoffs.
Oh,
yeah. And 3 games of 45 points or more, including a couple of games against Denver. So he's kind of like the opposite of Embiid to me, is that like the regular season stuff is like good, not elite, but very good.
Mm-hmm.
The playoff stuff, though, is just like, man, you look at that finals run they had, 31 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists, going all the way to the finals before finally succumbing to the Bucks. And then I just look at now and like this past postseason, and I'm like, he's on the same team with Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker's the man on that team. Like he's the go-to guy when it matters, not Kevin Durant. So that's why I had Booker so high. But like looking at some of the regular season stats and some of the track record stuff, I get why other people might not.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with the go-to guy statement. I think that is more out of like necessity and not having enough time to gel as a team than it is him just being far and away the best player on that team. I think there's merit in saying that when like you're Kevin Durant and that name holds a lot of cachet, but like that locker room is Booker's. Absolutely, like as a transplant. So I think there's merit in it, but I think that'll look a lot different next year because those guys are all going to trust each other a hell of a lot more. So, and they're going to be comfortable with the styles of play. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Durant stuff happened like at the trade deadline or something like that, didn't it?
Yep. It did. And then he only played like 13 games for the Suns before the playoffs because he got hurt.
Yeah. So I think like Booker was 10 on my list. And I think that that's a really good spot for him considering how like young he is, being in the West, doing what he's done with like the group that he had. I think is like another one of those things is kind of important to take into consideration. I have extremely high expectations for him. When it comes down to it, he does a lot of things really, really well. And I think he's a guy who's easier to mesh with than some of these other guys. And I think that that's like going to be the tail of the tape of his success is he's going to make it work with what he has. And he's like a really good player. He's going to attract talent there. And I think they'll get it done.
You know what I was saying earlier about Jason Tatum? I asked if he was like a very efficient volume scorer. I actually think Devin Booker fits that mold a little bit for me more
Yeah.
as a player, where it's like he creates a lot. I mean, he makes threes. Don't get me wrong. He shoots a lot of them, and he does make enough, for it to matter. But he's so good at creating in the mid range that it does kind of feel like he's plucked out of a different era and just is like more efficient at doing it than a lot of guys were.
Yeah,
way back
Yeah.
in the day.
that's fair.
Clint, you were talking about how that locker room is his. Yeah, it's because he was there, but it's because he was there when it was shit.
Yeah.
He went through all of the hard shit for years. And I mean, he was on that roster during the bubble when nobody thought shit of them and they didn't lose a fucking game. All the guys on that roster, like he's earned that respect from working through all the hard times, as opposed not to like take anything away from Kevin Durant, because obviously he's worked very hard at accomplishing everything that he has. But like it's a lot different when you've been in that shitty spot and you've seen this guy like rise from the ashes in a city that has not done shit. And as opposed to like, oh, that guy's like really, really great and he just came over here.
Yeah, I mean, we all had him kind of top 10-ish. This next guy, we all had top 10. And I can't believe that I was the lowest on this guy because he's my favorite player. But it is number 6 is Mavericks guard Luka Doncic. Clint had him 5, Devin 6, Matt 8, and I had him all the way down at 10.
Doing him dirty.
I know. And it's hard because, like I said, coincidentally, he's my favorite player, and I had him the lowest. I mean, I'll just throw out my case. I love Luka. I think he's incredible. You can quote any single statistic, and he's just amazing across the board at every single thing. It's like the advanced stats are great. He scores a ton, assists, rebounds. He's super talented. And maybe it's just because I was so disappointed in him this year, but how many guys throughout the history of the NBA have been consensus top 10 players and not even finished 10th in their conference?
Tracy McGrady.
Tracy McGrady.
Well, what's funny is a lot of the things we said about Damian Lillard, you could actually, I mean, he's much younger at this point in time, hasn't been in the league as long, but you could say a lot of these things about Luka Doncic too. Like he's got the big playoff moments, several of them against the same team. The Clippers, he's just like put up huge numbers against them several times.
Guard for life.
So he's got like the big numbers in playoffs. He's got, he clearly is not phased by the moment. He handles the playoffs very well. Doesn't look nervous. Seems like he's in control of the situation. Plays better in the playoffs than he does in the regular season. But what has he done? He hasn't. What has he done? As a team, what have the Mavericks done in the playoffs? The 3 times.
I think, yeah, I would agree. My thing, I probably gave him empathy points. I felt a little bad for him because he had to share a locker room with fucking literal stage 4 cancer. So like, yeah, I do give him a little bit of like a bump on there, but like so my only complaint with Luka is, again, it kind of goes back to the accountability piece or whatever. It's just like, dude, stop bitching to the refs and just play the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're being a little yappy, and if it's like a one-off thing or every once in a while, that's fine. But it seems like every game that like he'll quit on plays and just look at the officials like, did you not see it? And it's like, oh, did you not see that the ball's in transition and you're getting fucking scored on? Like, hustle back, man. Like, and that's not to take away anything from his game. He's phenomenal. I have him at 5 for a reason. Like, I think if I'm going to build a team, I absolutely want him on there. I just change up the attitude a little bit. Like, I think that's really all that I would like say as far as coaching. Like, he's done numbers wise and stuff. He's done great with the time that he's had in the league. And I think that, again, it's like you are a couple of better games, a couple of, different situations away from really having success. And that goes into that like luck part that I talked about earlier. But I do believe that like Luka absolutely deserves to be on like in the top 10. And I do think it's kind of telling that it's like, okay, like, yeah, your winning percentage wasn't great and you guys were bottom of the barrel at the end of the season this year. However, um, I would keep him here. And if we go into next year and he underperforms again, I'm definitely dropping him. Like I would absolutely drop him way lower.
Part of me wonders, like, okay, so obviously the Mavericks really messed up the Jalen Brunson situation, right? As good as
Yeah.
Luka is, and obviously, he succeeds with the ball in his hands. Like you want the ball in Luka's hands. But the Mavericks didn't realize what an asset they had in Jalen Brunson. They let him go, and then obviously we saw what he did for New York. Like, are they using Luka in too much of a heliocentric style offense? Like where they're like, they're kind of he's kind of used like this weird older version of LeBron James mixed with James Harden. Like it's kind of like I feel like his play style in a way. So they're like, give him the ball, let him do whatever. He's either going to score or find somebody, and it works a lot. But do we think maybe there's a possibility that team is just really riding by that mindset, maybe a little bit too much?
I
It's
think
all the
like-
eggs in one basket.
Like, can you really win doing that? Like,
Uh,
I don't really know if you can.
I think you can make an argument that since they acquired Luka Doncic, the Mavericks are actually the worst run organization in the NBA. We look at like what they've done since then. They trade for Porzingis. They don't retain him. They trade him away. They have Jalen Brunson in house. They let him go for a cheap contract. They have this team that makes the Western Conference Finals last year, ends up losing to the Warriors, but like they made it based on basically having Luka and then having all of these switchable wing defenders like Dorian Finney-Smith and all those guys. And they're like, you know what we're going to do this season? We're going to take our switchable wing defenders and we're going to trade for Kyrie Irving. And ever since they got rid of like Dorian Finney-Smith and those guys, the defense has just fallen off a cliff. And that's why they were so bad the second half of the year, even though they have these two great offensive players, quote unquote.
And here is where like this is kind of where I started to pump the brakes on Luka a little bit too, is by all the reports, he wanted Kyrie back. So
well,
that
I think
NBA players
that
love
makes
Kyrie
me
Irving.
question his judgment.
No,
I
they
think
they all love Kyrie Irving.
It's like, man,
I mean,
man,
you
don't
can
know
say
why.
that I
Don't know why.
question all of their judgments.
it's like, man, that guy thinks the earth is flat, but have you seen him make a layup before? Oh, jeez. Really
I
gets
think-
my blood boiling.
Well, he's not the first player to make that mistake. We're going to talk about another guy who made that mistake of tying his wagon to Kyrie Irving. And that is Suns forward Kevin Durant.
you are killing it with the segues right now. Like,
Yeah, segue game is on point.
Been practicing all week.
You should see him on his Segway.
Jesus.
Doing segues on a segue. Clint had Kevin Durant number 4, Devin 5. I had him 6, and Matt had him 7. We actually just kind of lined up perfectly 4, 5, 6, 7. Talent wise, very easy to argue that he's a top 5 player. Still, he's just so incredible when he's healthy. I had him down at 6, really, because since he left Golden State, he's played about 45 games per year in 4 seasons, and we haven't been able to rely on him to be healthy. But man, like
fair.
when he is, God, like he comes into the Suns this year at the trade deadline, like we said, he only plays like 13 games with the team, and then he comes into the playoffs and drops like 30 and 40 burgers on the Nuggets. It's like, how many guys can do that on a brand new team you've played 10 games with?
Notoriously smoking weed. I saw that recently too. He's like, it's the NBA. Everybody's doing that as he like reeks of marijuana coming in the facility or whatever. I was like, bold move, Kevin. Bold move.
Even though he hasn't been able to play a lot of games every season since his Achilles tear. I've mentioned this before on your podcast, but he's the only player I've ever seen that has who like beat that injury. I feel like most NBA players, I can't think of a single one. I think Dominique Wilkins had like one good season after he tore his Achilles or something like that, maybe two. But Kevin Durant is effectively still the same player. He's not quite as explosive, but he never really needed to be that much anyway. I don't know.
No,
From a play style standpoint, I am very impressed with how he plays the game, and how he's been able to remain basically just as effective as he always has been, just in a slightly different way.
He's so smooth.
Yeah.
Like everything he does is so smooth. Even when it's explosive, it's still smooth.
Because it's like he doesn't get to the free throw line as much as he used to. I mean, he still gets there enough, like 6 to 7 times a game, but not at like his peak where he was like 10, 9 or 10 per game. But he's if he couldn't move at all, he could still just be a catch and shoot shooter. Like he would just be that guy. So as long as he's got a little bit of explosiveness left, he's going to be just fine.
When I look at Kevin Durant, like his longevity is incredible, and he's not like fucking pounding the shit out of people either. I think he is a very cautious isn't the right word. He's very smart with how he uses his body. Like he's not getting tore up. He's not getting banged around like LeBron is. And I think that has to do with like the longevity. And I think that has to do with like him coming back and being as successful as he is, because he didn't have to go put an enormous amount of stress on like the tendons and stuff that they tore. And like he's got a little bit of a leaner body. He didn't fucking bulk the hell out like Giannis and LeBron did, like those the before and after pictures, like the first 6 seasons in the league with those guys, it's like amazing how much muscle weight they put on. But I think Kevin Durant's like skill set, and with how smooth he is, with how much finesse he can put on the ball, I think that's why he is as good as he is. And his fucking first step is incredible. And he covers so much ground. Like that's the other thing that kind of gets lost in the sauce a little bit, is like he can literally like make it from the 3-point line, dribbling the ball like one time and going and getting to the basket. Like I would not be surprised if I saw that out of him. And it's just like he's got a really unique body, and I think that really, really helps his game.
Yeah, there's a couple guys we're going to talk about here that have games that are going to age gracefully. It's like, I don't think it's a spoiler alert that we're going to talk about Steph Curry in the top 4 here in a little bit, but like Steph has a game just because of his shooting ability that like he's going to have a spot on an NBA floor like into his late 30s, even though he's a small point guard. I see Kevin Durant in that way too, that like his game is not as much based on like physicality as it is on finesse.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing that someone with his body type, being 7 feet tall and being that skinny, has made the career that he's made. He never bulked out, like you said. He never like had to get super physical, all these things, and just like he's kind of looked the same since college, and he's been incredible for 15 years now. Number 4, someone that I know Matt's going to be very excited to talk about, is Miami forward Jimmy Butler. So Matt had him 4, I had him 5, Clint 6, Devin 7. Another like kind of funny that like pretty much the same rankings as Durant, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just different ones of us had him in a different order. So he was tied with Kevin Durant, and the computer broke the tie for us and put Jimmy at 4. But I was looking at Jimmy's stats. I was kind of doing the notes for the podcast and thinking about Jimmy. I think somehow he's still underrated in a way. Like, I know he's getting his shine and his recognition from what he just did in the playoffs, but I was looking at like the advanced stats, and I just think that this dude is better than people realize. Because I think people are like, yeah, he's another guy like Devin Booker, where like the regular season performance is like very good, but not awesome. But like the playoff performance is so elite. Jimmy has played 4 years in Miami now. regular season offensive rating this year, 135, defensive rating 112. The last 3 years, this is offensive defensive rating, 124, 108, 127, 108, 123, 108. To carry the load that this dude carries on offense for this team and still play elite defense is basically something that nobody else in this league does.
Well, yeah, he's literally the greatest Marvel superhero and Spider-Man. Like, and I say that as a joke because I genuinely believe that like Jimmy Butler has so much fucking animosity for the people that have wronged him that he is just dragging and just putting out elite levels of whatever it is out of spite. He's like, fuck you, I don't care what's going on. I'll take this 8th seed all the way to the finals because that's what I'm going to do to prove you that like you fucked up getting rid of me.
Yeah, 4 years in Miami, he's made 3 Eastern Conference finals and 2 finals.
And regarding just like a player's personality and their mindset, is there anyone that you would rather have over Jimmy Butler, like on your team? No.
When we were making this list, it's like my first tier is like guys who, if this guy is on my team, I can win a championship. And I was like, okay, like our top 3 all fit in that list.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have a consensus top 3. We all voted the same 3 guys in the same order. Those 3 guys all on this list. And I was like, how many other players in the NBA are there where if I have this guy, I'm a championship contender automatically? Doesn't matter what else I have. I think you can make an argument that Jimmy is the 4th guy.
I think it's really hard to argue against that given the last 4 years.
All right. I'll argue against it. I think that those pictures look a lot different if he's in the West. I think if he's in a much tougher conference, like he's going to struggle a lot more. And I could be wrong. Like that's totally fair. But at the same token, yeah, he's got a great, and I would like, I believe Jimmy's like an awesome player. I have an enormous amount of respect for him, but I don't think that it would look the same if he was in the West.
I don't disagree, but I think that you could say that about any of the guys on this list that are playing in the East.
For sure.
And like one of, Giannis and the Bucks won a championship in that span. Well, like he went toe to toe with them, and shit, if it goes a different way, then well, there you go. That team that they went to toe to toe with ended up winning the championship over the West anyways.
Yeah.
I look at it like, this year, I think the East is actually like on par with the West this season. I think
bold claim.
In the past, that has not been true. It's been a long time since that's been true, but there are very good teams in the East, and the Heat took all those teams to task as an 8 seed, right? Like they beat the Bucks, and we're going to talk about Giannis here in a little bit and about some of the issues that he ran into in the playoffs. But they beat the Bucks, they beat the Celtics, they beat a Knicks team that was playing pretty good basketball all the time. And then, like, yes, they lost 4-1 in the finals to the Nuggets, but I think a lot of those games were closer than, like, it's closer than 4-1 sounds.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they put up a good fight. Not like anybody was really going to put up a good fight against the Nuggets this year, but, like...
Nobody did.
No, they just steamrolled everybody. But I think any time that you are making Eastern Conference finals and finals that consistently, like this was the thing about LeBron James for years, is that he made 9 Eastern Conference finals in a row or whatever it was in a super crappy East. But still, like the way that sports is played, to make the Eastern Conference finals that consistently is something to be celebrated, right? Because it's
Absolutely.
like the one ball bounces a different way, or like you twist your ankle or something like that. So
also, let's not forget.
I don't disagree though. I don't disagree with Clint. I just think it's very impressive still.
Oh yeah.
Not only were they the 8th seed, but they were a play-in team. They had to play in play-in games this year.
Yeah.
They lost their first play-in game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the Hawks.
They lose to the Hawks in a play-in game, and then they just go on a scorching surge of dominance.
They threw that game against the Hawks so that Jimmy could piss himself off enough to go into Jimmy mode.
I don't. So I think Jimmy's play across all of his teams is like why I would put him up on the list because like he's always just like outworked everybody that he's been around. I think that that's really fair to say, and I think that like some of the team, like I think the Bulls absolutely could have done a hell of a lot better job if like Tibbs would have taken a little bit of a different tact. I think that like his work ethic is incredible, and he has done a lot with his stuff. And the one thing I hope pans out in his favor is I do hope he gets to play with Dame so that like he doesn't have to just shoulder this enormous burden and only be able to turn it on in the playoffs.
That
Absolutely.
team, the Heat having Dame, Jimmy, and Bam is basically this podcast wet dream.
Yeah.
Like it's just Matt and I have been talking about Jimmy and Dame playing together forever. We're so close. Come on. All right, let's go to the top three. And these were all consensus picks. We had the same three guys in the same order. And like we mentioned earlier in the podcast, this was actually the easiest part of this list.
Yeah.
Made sense. Number 3 is Golden State Warriors point guard Steph Curry. I think if he would have made this list last year at this time, he would probably be number 1. He was just coming off of winning the finals. He was finals MVP. He had an awesome playoff run. That's just kind of how this list works. Not to foreshadow too much. I've watched Curry for years. So when I was in high school, I went to see him play when he was at Davidson in the Final Four or in the Elite Eight, whatever it was, in Detroit against Kansas. He's been one of my favorite players for a long time, like pre-NBA. I have never been as scared of him as I was watching him play against my team in a 7-game playoff series this past postseason. Mostly because my team's never made the playoffs. We've never played significant enough basketball for me to care. But watching him play against your team is a totally different feeling than watching him play against anybody else. It just like, even though he's 34, it literally feels like every time he touches the ball, he's going to hit a 3. It just, I know that's not going to happen. I know he shoots like 40 something percent. So that's like, 4.5 times out of 10, but it feels like it's going to be 10 out of 10. And I think that he hits this, like, I don't even know what to call it, like this plateau as a basketball player that very few athletes reach, where he's just downright terrifying. I don't even know that the two guys we have ahead of him on this list are like that level of fear instilling. Like I think of like Steph Curry and Patrick Mahomes and like other great players throughout history of like, I am terrified of that dude.
In horror films, like the scariest thing is never on screen, right? And that's the thing with Steph is like
the scariest thing is coming off a screen.
That too. But he literally cannot be on the screen when you're watching it on TV and still be easily within his shooting range.
What's interesting too, you had mentioned his age, and it is kind of, it's getting to the point where it's like, when is he going to start looking old? And I was watching some like highlights from 2016 when he had that crazy stat line back then, and it was his second MVP award. And the only thing I think that was better about him then than it is now is that he was a little quicker. Like that was actually it. Like he was just a little speedier, but he's a much better player now than he is then, in my opinion. Maybe not much better. I think he's a better player now than he actually was in 2016. He's stronger.
There's a difference between better and smarter.
Well, he's smarter, but he's also like stronger. He's like, because that's one thing about him that I think is incredibly underrated, is actually like how strong he is for a player of his size. Like he's way more built than he was back then, and I feel like that's part of the reason why he can play like for as long as he's been playing at the level that he plays at. While he hasn't sacrificed, what makes him good, he's still pretty darn quick. It's interesting. He's a better rebounder now too. It's just like nothing is really deteriorated.
I think I think that part goes to like the stronger though. Like he's
Absolutely,
always
yeah.
tried to chase down like rebounds. He's always been a guy who's trying to go get rebounds. However, like when you're a little bit bigger, you got a little bit more weight on you. That impacts like if you're banging with the big guys down
Absolutely.
low. Yeah, like that.
But it's like the right amount of weight to not like, you know, be
Yeah.
an injury risk or somehow make him too slow to play the position. Like, I don't know, but it's I don't know. It's interesting because like with Kevin Durant, you could look at Kevin Durant now and then like MVP Kevin Durant and be like, well, you know, he was probably better in that one individual season than he has been in any other individual season since then. Maybe not maybe the Warrior seasons you could say was probably the best version of Kevin Durant. But with Steph Curry, it's like which version of him, like where is his peak? Like, I mean, clearly he's still like in his prime.
Steph Curry is the epitome of consistency is king.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The last time we made this list 2 years ago, like I was championing the cause of him being number one. Even now with us like all at consensus, putting him at number 3, any given game, he is far and away number one. Like
Yeah, I watched it. Game 7 versus the Kings where he dropped 50.
yeah.
That'd be it.
Come on. Yeah, I think you can make an argument for all 3 of these guys.
For
I mean,
sure.
I think number 1 is pretty clear cut. It's very obviously going to be Austin Reeves, but
yeah,
these other guys have an argument, and these are like, this is why the top 3 is the top 3 is like, okay, I get one of these guys, I'm an automatic championship contender, and any given game, they are the best player in the league.
Yeah.
So, number 2 is actually the guy who beat Steph Curry out the last time we made this list for the number 1 spot.
Yeah.
Beating Steph Curry out again. It is Giannis Antetokounmpo, the forward for the Bucks. Consensus number 2. Homie just averaged 31 points per game in 32 minutes per game this season.
Pretty efficient.
Almost a point per minute.
I'm just gonna come out and say it right away. So obviously the Bucks had a tough playoff series this year. He had a couple weird possessions there in some of those games that did not look good for him, but I really like put a lot of that blame on their coach. Unfortunately, I know he had a tragedy in the family, but they fired him, and I feel like that was, you know, his inability to make adjustments in the playoffs. I think was really their biggest issue. I'm sick and tired of people. We've talked a little bit today about players that you would consider to be underrated in a way, and I still think Giannis in a lot of ways is underrated. I'm sick and tired of people acting like he can't score. Like, I get it. He's got an ugly jumper. He doesn't even really have a jumper. It's like, okay, but he's giving you 31 a game. Like that, he can score the ball. People act like he's this unskilled, you know, he's just 7 feet tall and incredibly athletic, which
I think you're wrong because it's people that you say, and it's literally James Harden. Like James Harden's fucking stupid. Yeah. Like
I forgot about that.
I think that's where that like.
Well, he did say that, but I have heard like people in my personal life like make that case to me, and they're like, well, you know, it's like, I mean, he's so easy to stop. All you got to do is force him to shoot, and it's like, okay, well, that really worked out really well when he won a title, didn't it? Like,
yeah. Like this fucking physical specimen who belongs to be in the pantheon where he comes from, sculpted out of fucking marble because the guy looks like he belongs on a superhero like film. You can't shoot. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
You're fucking dumb. Like,
but
if
dude,
you don't,
dumb.
So
Jesus Christ.
I gave Giannis a break on the playoff thing because like I did consider that when ranking him over Curry as like, should I have Curry over him? Curry went farther in the playoffs. So Giannis got hurt 11 minutes into game 1 against the Heat. It was obviously significant because he missed games 2 and 3 completely. He comes back for game 4 and he's like pretty good, 26 points. Game 5, they're on the brink of elimination. He's got this back thing going on still, and he drops a 38 and 20 on the Miami Heat. And they still lose, but like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
The playoff performances, man. Like before this year, the last 2 playoffs, he averaged 32, 14, and 7, and then 30, 13, and 5 in the year they won the championship. And he's just like a freak of nature, man.
I want to ask you guys a serious question, and you know, I'm genuinely looking for feedback here. Do you think like the same conversation happens in other sports? Like, oh, Aaron Judge is just great because he's got giant fucking horse thighs and can pound the ball yard. Like, that's so fucking stupid. Like, his body is a gift and it is his asset, but in a lot of ways, it's kind of like Shaq Diesel, man. Like, yeah, you can't fucking stop him because he's so strong and dominant.
Yeah.
Like, and that's like a knock on his talent. Like, are you kidding me?
That's because that's usually the comp people have is Shaq, and I think it's a good one because even when Shaq played, there were guys that were big, like there were 7-footers who had size to contend with Shaq, but they still couldn't do it. So it's like, what does that mean then?
Well, and just because you have the size, whatever gifts we want to talk about, doesn't mean you know how to use it.
I was just about to say that. How many freak athletes have we seen come into the league where it's like, this guy, this is something I talk about in the NBA draft every single season, where they're like, this guy does not know how to play basketball.
The fuck does that matter?
He's 7 feet tall. He can jump out of the gym and and like a lot of these guys flame out, but they're like, because of the athleticism, he has the upside. And like, that's the case with Giannis too, is like, because of the body, because of the athleticism, he has the upside, but like, he's the one who maximized it by practicing his craft, like honing his craft and maximizing his skill. Like, he's a very, very skilled player. But then also sometimes he's just the fucking Kool-Aid man. And the other team's like, we're going to build a wall. And he's like, oh, it's Giannis time. And he just can plow through that shit too. So it's all different sides of the same coin, right? Like, he uses his physicality, he uses his skill, and that's what makes him the number 2 player on our list.
Not only is he all of these things, but it goes back to like some of the things that I said about like Dame and some of these other guys. He's a fucking class act. He is someone that I would want like my kids to look up to.
Absolutely.
And like, he stuck it out and he delivered it, like in the town that he was drafted, and that was really important to him. That takes a lot of integrity, and it also takes like a lot of heart. And I absolutely believe that, like, I have an enormous amount of respect for this guy because of like how he carries himself. He's not a fucking dickhead. Like he got picked up and taken to practice one day by some like stranger, and he was just like, yeah, I play basketball for the Bucks, and like we're trying to do our best. And like, he was a humble guy, and he's still a humble guy, and like, I have a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, this is maybe a topic for a different podcast, but I think he's probably the number 1 athlete in all of professional sports that I would want my son looking up to. Like, thinking about how he was a homeless immigrant from Greece, coming to like all the way to where he is now and doing it in the manner in which he's done it. Like, the amount of work and dedication that takes, and then just to be like such a class act in the NBA and just be such a good dude to everybody. Like, you look at how nice he is to fans and like how he treats people. That's the type of dude that I want my son to look up to.
Well, I mean, we've seen reporters numerous times like really try to give him the business and get under his skin, and he'll clap back at him. But every time he does, it is with like so much self-control, using nothing but the utmost respect. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, when I work in mental health, like, we don't always do that ourselves. So,
you know what's crazy too? 2 of the guys we talked about, Giannis and then Jimmy Butler, both really didn't have like the easiest of childhoods. It seems like I think Jimmy Butler also kind of had some challenges of his own growing up, and it's like those experiences clearly made them who they are. And I think really like that mental aspect of it, like their personalities, how they carry themselves, is such a huge part of what makes them successful.
Well, Jimmy Butler got abandoned by his father, Michael Jordan, at a young age.
I was just going to bring that up. I was going to ask about that, but
yes. So let's close this list out with the number 1 player in the NBA. We don't have to spend a ton of time here because I just don't even think there's an argument for this right now. It's Austin Reeves, number 1.
Clearly.
clearly. Nikola Jokic, the center for the Denver Nuggets.
I thought we were all in on Marvin Bagley.
Ooh.
Oh, dude, I forgot about Marvin. Marvin Bagley's so good, dude.
So Jokic just led his team on one of the most dominant playoff runs of all time, averaged 30, 13 and a half, and 9.5 in 20 games, 129 offensive rating, 108 defensive rating in the playoffs. My two things about Jokic. One, no matter which way you analyze basketball, I feel like you're going to come out with him as the number one player. Like playoff success, he's got the awards, he won the championship. If you look at the advanced stats, led the league in PER, box plus minus, win shares, and true shooting this season. Like, just absolutely incredible guy. The other thing, and I talked to Matt about this recently, is like, there is no stat line that would shock me if you told me that Jokic put it up. Like, if Matt texted me and was like, dude, Jokic had a 60, 20, and 10 last night, I would just be like, yeah, that's right. If you text me and you're like, he had a 50, 30, 20 last night, I'd just be like, that's pretty impressive, but I would not be shocked, honestly. Like, there's nothing this man can do at this point where that would truly like stun me.
I'm going to actually just start texting you random stat lines during the upcoming season and just see.
If you text me tomorrow, if you text me tomorrow and said he had a 50, 20, 30, I'd be like, that doesn't sound right because we're not playing basketball. But if anybody could do it, I mean.
You know what's crazy too is like, for a center, how sort of, I guess, for a lack of a better phrase, like unathletic he appears to be, like how he's not like a big leaper or anything, how good of a rebounder he is. I don't remember what series or what game it was in the playoffs this year. I think it was against the Lakers in one of those games where he had like 12 rebounds in the first quarter. And I was just like, that is insane to me. And then like a lot of his, like to your point, a lot of his final stat lines, it'll be like, you'll be watching the game. It'll be the third quarter. And you're like, yeah, Jokic is, he's really controlling the game really well, really getting his teammates involved. Then they like bring up his like stats and you're like, oh, he has 28 points, 15 rebounds and 11 assists.
Yeah, the quietest triple double.
Yeah, he's doing more than just getting his teammates involved. He's doing all of it.
Yeah, I would say like Jokic. I'd say the same thing, but like the thing I love watching him play, mostly because he looks a little bit like me, and like body type is pretty similar to mine, and I wish I could do the fucking things that he could do. Or that he does, but like the interviews that he gives, it's just like, yeah, we failed and we put our nose to the grindstone, came back and we put in the hard work and we won. And it's like, it wasn't like self-aggrandizing. It wasn't like he really does make it a team effort. He talks about team. He knows that he can count on his guys. And I think that like, if you were to have a candid conversation, he would be like, absolutely, I wouldn't be in the place where I am now without my teammates. And that's why I have so much respect for him, because like he does it all. And like he will absolutely give credit to the people around him. And it's not just like the me show.
Yeah, I love it. I love the attitude. I love that like he wins an NBA finals and he's like, I'm going home to Serbia to ride my horse.
Yeah, like
you see that he won like
simple
a horse.
joys in life.
Yeah. He won like a horse
we got the
riding.
job done. We got the job done. We can go home now.
Like, he won like a horse riding championship or like a breeding championship or something in Serbia, and he's running around the barn like jumping up and down. And like when he won the NBA finals, he's just like, yeah, like can I go home to my horse now? Like I love the attitude. I love obviously that he's a team first guy, and just like Devin said too, it's so quiet sometimes. I was watching an NBA Finals game and I was like, man, I feel like Jokic has been kind of quiet tonight. And they're like, that's 30 points, 21 rebounds for Nikola Jokic. And I was like, oh shit. He's just awesome in every sense of the word, man.
Basketball with Jokic is like 2K on the lowest difficulty setting. Like,
and it's just, I feel like people, would always knock his defense for the longest time, but I feel like I'm not looking at the advanced stats. I think
he's definitely gotten better.
Yeah, like I'm not looking at the advanced stats in front of me, so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here. But don't they point to him being like a plus defender? Like he's not, maybe not plus, but he's not, certainly not a liability.
No, I mean,
yeah, I believe so.
His last couple, like his career defensive rating is 107. Like that's really fucking good. And it's more of like a team defensive effort in Denver. Like he may not be the best one-on-one defender, but like he knows what his role is and he plays it excellently.
Perfectly. Yeah. His issue is quickness. Like it doesn't like I said it was quiet. Like he has these quiet stat lines because he's not barreling down the court like Giannis, like slam dunking a ball so hard that you can hear it outside of the arena.
Yeah.
Like there's so many things where it's like, okay, like, yeah, we're going to push this screen and I'm going to like shuffle back to where my spot is. However, it's not like super quick or like super elegant. And I think that's why he catches or doesn't get enough credit is because it's not like fun to watch as far as like, you would be impressed with like his ball handling and stuff. Like it looks goofy at times, and that's like part of the reason why I like it. It's because it's just like
the way he like handles definitely looks good, but like his passing to me is so entertaining to watch. He's definitely like I definitely agree with like the point you're making and all of that, but for me personally, he's one of the most fun players to watch just because he brings the ball up the court, the passes he makes. I mean, no one at that size is making the plays and decisions that he is in the way that he does. So I definitely I get it. It's like, and then even when he's scoring too, like, he's just like in the post. I feel like, and also, I mean, the way he plays in the post is kind of old school sometimes.
He plays back to the basket.
He'll dribble like 7 times and like they just can't stop him from doing it. And then he'll either just do a little like hook shot or he'll fade away, and it just always looks like it's going in. Like every single time. His
footwork is great too.
And he's just got a really soft touch. And it just like, it's very unassuming. And then like by the time he's got 25, you're like, wait, when did he get all those points?
Yeah. Every single aspect of his on court game is just the peak, right? Like he can do everything on both sides of the floor. Yeah. He's not the most coordinated. He's not like the super athletic lateral quickness guy. It doesn't matter. Best basketball IQ of like almost anybody we've ever seen. I think like he's probably in the top 5 like all time for basketball IQ and just knowing where to be and finding his guys. And like Matt and I talked about this before on the podcast, is that the combination of like size, touch, and vision is something that no one has ever had in the history of the NBA before. And it allows him to make passes and like see things that nobody else can do and see. And it's just, it's so incredible to watch.
And then you combine that with a guy who literally doesn't waste movement ever. Like, I think a lot of the fanfare loves like tons of crazy fucking dribble moves but like, that's all wasted movement. You're not going anywhere. And he also applies that lack of wasted movement to defense. So he's always in the right spot. He doesn't ever have to close a ton of space. He's just there. And so people don't pick up on him. But if you're already there, like there's no point in running.
Yeah.
Yep. So I don't think there's an argument for him at number 1. Like he's very clearly number 1, but that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matador_defense. You can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. We also established an email address for the podcast, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. If you guys want to send us some feedback about what you like about the show, what you don't like, or if you just want to chit chat with me and Matt, we are looking forward to hearing from you guys. Special thanks to Clint and Devin for not only helping put this list together, but also putting up with me and Matt for a 3-hour plus podcast. We enjoyed having you guys. Thanks for participating in this exercise.
It was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you guys letting me on again after I wasn't on the last one. So
It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely.
vote.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
That was a good time. So starting next week, Matt and I are going to be back 2 episodes a week coming out on Wednesdays and Saturdays, previewing all 8 of the NFL divisions heading into the start of the NFL season.
Yep.
Starting next week with the NFC and the AFC North. Going to be talking some Motor City Kitties. Going to be talking some Joey Brr, as well as some of the other teams that are in those divisions. And we will do 2 a week until we've covered all 8 divisions, leading up to the week of September 4th, the first week of the NFL season, where we will do the Picks podcast, giving you all of our playoff picks, Super Bowl picks, and everything in between. So that's what's up next. This was the last basketball podcast of the year. I'm going to miss basketball. I'm going to miss talking to you guys, but thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks. Really appreciate it.
No problem. We'll see you guys soon. Matt, I will talk to you next week.
Yep.
And everybody else have fun. So, all right. Bye, guys.
Bye, Robin.
Bye, Mom.
See ya.